Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Share Screen Africa's Raptor Education Series. Apologies if you can't see me. I am once again in the dark. Thank you to ESCOM. But I am here, I promise. For those of you that have not met me yet, my name is Kalen Padiachi from the KNAV Conservation Foundation, and I'm your host tonight, talking about raptors and raptor conservation in Africa. So before we start with our episode tonight, I would like to show you guys the brand new podcast that will be launching on the 7th of November. So only in a couple of weeks, the Flight Against Extinction. Very exciting podcast that has been produced by Leadership for Conservation in Africa. The Flight Against Extinction is a journey through the diverse natural habitats in our world and a spotlight on the challenges they face. Habitat loss and habitat degradation have a massive impact on our fauna and flora. And in this series, we explore the impact on our feathered friends. World-renowned experts join Lisma Funzel to discuss the challenges and present some solutions to the larger problem. We highlight some of the most threatened birds, such as your white-winged flufftail, vultures, and African penguins that, of course, are currently facing a very uncertain future. So it's going to be a fantastic podcast. Please, if you can, join that launch on the 7th of November. You can do so by visiting Share Screen Africa's Facebook page and follow the links and the prompts on there. Marit is going to be putting up, I think, the link a little later in the chat below, so just keep an eye on that. In the meantime, let's get back to our episode. We are joined by our headline speaker for the night, Dr. Ulrich Oberpiller, who is going to be speaking to us about a very charismatic group of raptors in Africa, which is, of course, the eagles of Africa. Super exciting talk coming up from Ulrich. After chatting to Ulrich, we are going to be joined by our raptor expert on the series, Simon Tomset, who's going to be taking us on a virtual tour in Kenya to visit some of the eagles up close and personal that he has with him at the Kenya Bird of Prey Trust. After we visit with Simon, we've got a special treat tonight. Our inspirational speaker, Lemaine Parr, is actually going to be giving us a live discussion tonight from Kenya, which is also going to be a very exciting talk. He comes from the Kenya Bird of Prey Trust as well. So we're looking forward to that. And of course, once we finish off with Lemaine, we open the floor up to our esteemed audience to chat to us a little bit about their raptor experiences and ask all those burning questions that you've been holding pent up since last week's episode. Once again, keep an eye out on your email address that you used to register for tonight's talk. We're going to be sending out our Raptor education posters. There's 4 of these posters for you guys to collect tonight. So again, once they come through, share them far and wide. They are completely copyright free, so you can print them, use them, share them however you like. This is our way to contribute to raptor bird of prey conservation throughout Africa. But without further ado, I would love to introduce you all to our headline speaker, Ulrich Oberpiller, who is a highly regarded ornithologist and wildlife photographer who has gained significant recognition for his expertise in the field. Collaborating with Berger and Christo, he has co-authored 4 comprehensive guides focusing on birds and mammals. Currently serving as the education manager at the esteemed National Zoological Gardens, Ulrich plays a crucial role in spreading knowledge and awareness about wildlife conservation. Renowned for his passion and skill in wildlife photography, he is particularly celebrated for his exceptional courses on mammals, birds, and environmental studies. It is my absolute honor to introduce you once again to Ulrich Oberpiller. Ulrich, over to you.
Good evening, Kalen, and good evening to all the those that have joined. It's really great to see so many of you. I see that we really have a sort of a full house. although obviously you're sitting at home, but it's great to see so many of you. So those of you that are my fellow South Africans, welcome. Those of you that are from other parts of Africa, welcome as well. And I trust that there are even some participants that come from another part of the world. So as you've heard, I'm going to speak about the larger raptors, the eagles, and some of the groups that actually are fairly closely related to the eagles, although they're strictly speaking not eagles, but they're certainly a very large and a very interesting group. So I've titled my presentation Real Birds Eat Meat, in contrast to those that don't eat meat, because they certainly are very majestic birds. One can't just help to be in awe by these powerful eagles, even the smaller ones. They're really awe-inspiring. And so they're really very, very special birds that we have in South Africa, in Africa, and also in the rest of the world. But first of all, I just want to thank all the photographers. I made use of a huge variety of photographs that I was able to source. So thank you very much to each and every one of the photographers to have contributed towards this presentation. And it just shows again what good quality of photography is out there. So I'm going to start with a question. I'm going to show you a dozen or so birds, and the question is this an eagle or is it not an eagle? So let me start with the first one. And obviously, you don't need to answer to the group. You can just sort of decide on your own whether you think this is an eagle or not an eagle. And I'll do that then, as I said, with a dozen or so birds. So our first one here, yes, it's certainly an eagle, and it's specifically a tawny eagle. And what then really is an eagle? Now, I presume that the term eagle actually means different things to different people, but strictly speaking, it's a fairly precise term. So many of the birds that are actually large and eagle-like are also often referred to as eagles, but strictly speaking, they are not eagles. So the eagles, the true eagles as we normally refer to them, and part of the true eagles are also the so-called hawk eagles. They are all quite large birds. Some of them are really very large. Some of them are smaller, about the size of a crow, but normally we think of an eagle as a large raptor. They're quite powerful, as you can see here on this particular tawny eagle. And then most important, all the true eagles, if one has a look at the legs, then the feathers actually stretch down all the way to the toes. Whereas with most birds, that lower part of the leg, the tarsus, is actually devoid of feathers, just covered with scales. But with the true eagles and the hawk eagles, it's always covered with feathers. So that makes it actually quite an easy group to identify. So the second slide again, the white background that you see, there's actually snow. So I'm showing some birds that don't occur in Africa at all, just to get to grips with what is an eagle and not an eagle. And this one, if one has a look at the lower legs, seem to be bare. So that tells us, no, it's not a true eagle or a snake eagle or a hawk eagle, but this is actually a sea eagle, Steller sea eagle. And the sea eagles are quite closely related to the fish eagles. As a matter of fact, that bald eagle from America, which I'm sure you all know, that's also actually one of the sea eagles, so that's also not a true eagle. Our next one is also quite a large bird, but it's certainly an African bird. And again, one can see that the lower legs are bare, so this can't be an eagle, and it is actually an auger buzzard. So the buzzards are also quite large, and at the first glance, they're quite eagle-like. As far as their habits are also concerned, they are fairly eagle-like, but we have a special name for them, the buzzards. So as I said, many of the other larger raptors are also called something eagle-like, as a sea eagle or a fish eagle or what, but they are not really eagles. Now this one here is also a large, powerfully built bird, which occurs quite widely in Africa in the summer months. So it's a migratory bird, and the fully feathered legs indicate that it is an eagle, yes, and it is a steppe eagle. Then we have a smaller bird, but also fairly powerfully built, although a little bit more slender, fully feathered legs. So it is an eagle. In this case, we call it a hawk eagle, not a true eagle, but a hawk eagle. But they're certainly in that same group. This one here, the snake, gives an indication what it should be. And also the lower leg of the one leg, at least one can see that is bare, and some other characteristics that I will get to at the moment. And this is then one of the snake eagles, the so-called short-toed snake eagle. Always used to be referred to as just a short-toed eagle, but nowadays more correctly the short-toed snake eagle. Then this one we all know, and that is the African fish eagle. So African fish eagles, strictly speaking, are not true eagles. They are fish eagles together with the sea eagles. Lower legs, we can see that immediately they are bare. This is a really very pretty bird. It's a bird from South America, and the legs don't show too well on this photograph, but I think one can make out that black and white color pattern there of the feathers. And this then is called an ornate hawk eagle. And again, the hawk eagles are part of the true eagle group. So this is also an eagle. Here you can't miss the legs, bare lower legs, or covered with scales. And this is not a eagle; it's a serpent eagle, or related to the snake eagles. Then a fairly small eagle, but it's certainly an eagle because you can see also the nice feathering, the leggings, as we often refer to them, the feathering on the legs. So this here is definitely an eagle, the booted eagle. And this one is often known as the most powerful eagle in the world. It's a bird that occurs in South America, and it is the harpy eagle. Now, most people also describe this as an eagle, although as you can see that the legs are not fully feathered. But one must always remember that there isn't a specific plan in nature, that everything has to fit nicely into categories. So maybe the Americas things are a little bit different than in the rest of the world. So we would maybe not call it a true eagle, but it's certainly a large and a powerful bird. And yes, it's certainly often referred to as an eagle. And then this one, I'm sure that most of you also know it, and that is Barrow's eagle, or as it's also called in many parts of Africa, the black eagle. And this is certainly an eagle. And that begs then the question again, what then are the true eagles or the hawk eagles? Now, I basically just want to tell you that again. So they're large raptors. The Barrow's eagle is one of the larger eagles that we have in the world, and certainly in Africa. Others, as I mentioned already, are quite a bit smaller. Ayers eagle, for instance, is sort of the size of a crow, more or less. But they're all powerfully built birds. They are agile and they're quite ferocious hunters. And they've got long, broad wings to fly with and to soar with. And so they're certainly always very majestic birds. Doesn't matter what size they are. They're really always very, very impressive birds. So here's our tawny eagle again, just in flight, just to show you the long, broad wings, which on the one hand, they make use of flapping flight when they hunt, but on the other hand, they can spend, just like the vultures, they can spend a lot of time up soaring in the air and just making use of the warm air currents up there. Now, these eagles, because they are large and majestic, together with some other larger raptors, they're often depicted as symbols of power. And so many of the emblems all over the world, they actually depict an eagle, and sometimes even this double eagle that we see here. And so if one has a look at the coat of arms of different African countries, then we see that the eagles are also quite well represented there. Now, I've just chosen four here, not for any particular reason. So maybe the country that you live in also has an eagle on the coat of arms. And I just chose these four because that would fit onto this page. So up here on the top left-hand side is South Africa's coat of arms. And this bird there is actually not an eagle. You can see the long crest there. That's actually a secondary bird. Then Gambia has got an eagle at the top of the coat of arms, so does Nigeria. And South Sudan, you can see the white head together, and one can just make it out there that the lower legs are bare, so that is actually a fish eagle, and thus not really a true eagle, but certainly also a large, powerful bird. And then obviously in Zimbabwe, there's the well-known stone engravings, which are known all over the world. And although it doesn't show clearly that this is an eagle, if one looks at the detail, this is certainly also one of the larger eagles. Now, because the eagles are large and powerful, that obviously has brought about a couple of myths. And here we've got sort of two myths in one picture. First of all, that bald eagle that is shown there is not actually an eagle, as I said already. And bald eagles are really fish-eating birds. And so for a bald eagle to catch a female deer, as this one has done, that would be quite impossible. In addition to that, the deer is far too heavy to be actually taken up into the air. Some of the large eagles would actually be able to kill fairly large prey, but a bald eagle is certainly not able to do so. And again, another example from the northern hemisphere, this is a golden eagle with a mountain goat there. And again, there's no way that a bird like this would be able to maybe catch an animal like that, but certainly not be able to carry it. So when you entered the discussion here, there was a video playing. So let me just play that once again. And then what I would like to do is just to discuss it a little bit, and sort of you can ask yourself the question, is this actually true, or what is actually happening here on this specific video? So this is really quite impressive. I'm sure many of you have seen this video previously, because it's making its round for many years already. And most people just take it at face value. And it really looks like a very impressive scene that has been shot here. But is it true? Now, obviously, what you see there has happened, but one must interpret that a little bit more in detail. And there's certainly two items of this little video clip that shows you that this is not quite really what has happened. And the first item that one can see right at the beginning of the video, let me just play the introductory part again. I'll just skip ahead a little bit. But here, when the bird is now launching into the air and flying and observing its potential prey, but then what happens then actually indicates that this is not a wild bird, because this bird is calling all the time. A hunting bird would do that. And what we see here, that the bird is actually flying. Let me just stop this here. One back there. The bird is flying directly in the direction of the photographer. And why would he do that? Well, there's really only one reason, is because the handler of the bird is actually standing behind the photographer. So this is a a trained bird. It's certainly not a wild bird at all. It's a trained bird. And then the rest of the scene as well, you know, a wild bird would never really do that, to cling onto the prey and take the tumble, because an injured eagle is certainly a dead eagle, and there's no way that a wild eagle would actually take the chance. So yes, the video is true on the one hand, but as I said, what they don't really show you is that this is a trained bird, a bird that was specifically trained for this purpose of shooting that video. And to train large eagles is actually not out of the ordinary. If one, for instance, has a look at the culture in Kazakhstan, in sort of Central Asia, there it's really a tradition that people would go out hunting with those big eagles. It's the same species that you've seen just now, which is the golden eagle. And on their traditional horseback and so on, they would hunt even large birds. So although this specific video was not photographed in Kazakhstan, because the chamois, this mountain goat, doesn't occur all the way east of Kazakhstan, but to take a very bird, a golden eagle, from its distribution and train it is certainly not out of the ordinary. So a very impressive video, but is it completely true? Well, no, certainly not. They leave out an important part there. And then I want to show another little video clip, which was taken in North America, in Montreal.
Oh, shit!
And in case you've missed what happened there, this bird was swooping down and it grabbed that little child that was sitting there next to the mother. And then as it picks up the child and flies away, then it's going to drop the child, dropping the child there. The mother obviously comes and gets the child again. So the question is again, is this true? And this one, and if you search the internet a little bit, then you will see this is really completely made up. You know, a wild bird to come into an urban area like that, I think that would very rarely happen. And although they would be able to take the prey the size of a child, I personally think it's very, very improbable to let this happen. So you can go into the detail and you will see that there are a number of mistakes that the photographers made, which actually do indicate it's not a true video. And so what I just want to indicate is that I'm sure you all know that already. There's so many videos out there, and one really has to ask this question: is it really true? And usually, you know, if it's too good to be true, then it probably is too good to be true. Now, there are many other things that are happening that actually are quite interesting. So nowadays, you can even go and fly with raptors in certain parts of the world. The bird that I'm showing here is not an eagle, it's actually an Egyptian vulture. But the activity that these people are busy with is called para-hawking. So there's a bird of prey, in this case the Egyptian vulture, that has been trained, that actually then goes up into the air together with the paragliders. And the person at the back is obviously the trained paraglider, and the lady in front is just a guest. And she has some food, and she then feeds this bird up there. And I think it must be awesome to actually be up there in the air and to be able to see and hear that bird flying and getting it really close to you in its natural habitat. And why do I show that? Because I believe in Mongolia you can even do this para-hawking with some golden eagles, as this lady is doing. So she's got a bit of meat there in her hand. If I were her, I wouldn't take it so closely there in the middle. I would just take it at the tip, because the eagles have got rather large feet. But in any case, you can see the excitement there in her face, and I think it must be wonderful to actually get a bird in that natural environment and to be able to experience that. So para-hawking is done in many parts of the world. I don't think it's done anywhere in Africa. And obviously, different people have got different thoughts about that. But I think it's really if it's done properly, it can be a wonderful tool to also educate people about the wonderful world of the raptors. Now, let's just have a look at the eagles that occur in Africa. And we've got quite a variety of species here. Our first one maybe doesn't look very familiar, but it's actually quite a well-known bird. And if I show the adult there, then I'm sure that you all recognize it as Barrow's eagle. So this is just a young bird. But just to have a look at the toes there, and especially the hind toe with a claw on both feet, you can actually see the hind claw, and that is really what kills the prey. So the front toes are more used to grasp the prey and get hold of it and to hold it down, and that claw on the hind toe that is really used to kill it. The muscles that operate the toes are obviously more in the upper part of the leg, and they're connected with tendons to the toes. So often one may think that a raptor, just like most other birds, they've got fairly thin lower legs, although they look a little bit thicker here with all the feathering that covers them, but they're fairly thin, but the muscles are in the upper part of the leg, and they are really very powerful. So the Verreaux's eagle is a well-known bird that occurs quite widely in Africa, in mountainous areas. The various species of Dassie or the Hyraxes, they form an important part of their diet, although they also take quite a number of other prey. Then these two birds, Simon Thompson has spoken about them already when he did his presentation a couple of weeks ago. So on the left-hand side, we've got the Marshall eagle, which is more of a savanna bird, and the crowned eagle, which is really a forest specialist. And he really compared them quite well, so I don't want to repeat anything here. Then we've got a number of the smaller eagles that are still a little bit more conspicuously colored, and a number of them are referred to as hawk eagles. So what is a hawk eagle? Very simply, a hawk eagle is a more slenderly built and thus a more agile true eagle, and they usually make use of more agile prey like birds, which are often hunted flight, and so that more slender body shape with the greater agility will really help them to find their prey. So at the bottom right, we've got the African hawk eagle, which is a very widely distributed bird in Africa, often overlooked because they sit very quietly in the crown of a tree. And the bird at the top left-hand side looks very similar, but it is Ayers eagle. And although this bird is quite widely distributed in Africa, it's certainly not a bird that is very well known. It's a fairly secretive bird, but certainly from a biological point of view, a very, very interesting eagle. Then we've got two more that we could also refer to as hawk eagles. The Bonelli's eagle there at the bottom, and our other one is a forest bird, although it sits there in a little bit of an open tree, but that is really more of a forest bird, so it occurs in Central Africa. And Bonelli's eagle is really more of a European bird, but it also does occur in some of the North African areas, especially in West Northern Africa, and also some of the other areas in North Africa. Then we've got a number of brown eagles. Now, because they're brown, if you concentrate on the color, they're often difficult to identify. But at least our first one here is easy to identify. That's a long-crested eagle. And this bird is also quite a specialist. He normally prefers areas of bigger trees that are interspersed with open, grassy, and often a little bit moister, swampy areas because they're very fond of play rats. One can see that long gait because they just swallow those rats in one go. They don't normally tear it apart. But because they sit in the open quite a lot of the time, they're easy to see while they're perch hunting. They just scan the surroundings and try and make out their prey. Then the others, from a color point of view, they look very similar. But if one considers other characteristics, they're also quite unique. At the top left is our tawny eagle that I've shown a couple of times already, very widely distributed in Africa and a resident bird here, and really a very opportunistic bird. So they are hunters, they are robbers, they take prey from other raptors, they are scavengers as well. So often when they sit on larger prey, they didn't kill it themselves, but they actually make use of the carcass that is available there. And at the bottom right is the steppe eagle. As the name indicates, this is a bird that comes all the way from the Russian and Asian steppes, and it visits many parts of Africa, not quite everywhere, but they certainly occur in the savanna areas mostly. And in summer, one can see them very often in larger flocks. Then we have the golden eagle at the top. This is also a bird that occurs very widely in the northern hemisphere, but they do occur in the northern part of Africa, especially if they're mountain ranges. Wherever they occur, they are really particularly of mountain ranges. So they don't occur very south into Africa, just in northern Africa. But because this is a bird that has a wide distribution in the northern hemisphere, it has been studied in detail, and so it's one of the most well-known of the larger eagles in the world. At the bottom is the eastern imperial eagle. There's also the Spanish imperial eagle from Spain that also enters West Africa, but the eastern imperial eagle actually migrates into north and eastern Africa and is certainly a more common bird there. Also a large, powerful hunter. Although it's so large, it's obviously a little bit more sluggish and it takes larger prey than the slightly smaller eagles, but certainly imperial, that majestic eagle is certainly a very good name for the bird. Then we have got two spotted eagles, and what I show here is the immature or the juvenile phase, because these birds are not spotted when they're in the adult plumage. So both of them here, the name refers to the juvenile phase. The greater spotted eagle on the right-hand side is a little bit bigger than the lesser spotted eagle, and this is more a bird of North and Eastern Africa. It migrates into Africa from Europe, but doesn't go really south of the equator. And then the lesser spotted eagle on the left-hand side, also a bird from the northern hemisphere that breeds there and visits us in Africa as a non-breeding bird, and it occurs quite widely in the savanna areas all the way down here into South Africa. And then the smallest of our two eagles is Walberg's eagle. That is a bird that also occurs in savanna areas and also migrates, but it migrates within Africa. It's a bird that breeds mainly in the southern part of Africa and then migrates northwards into tropical Africa. And the booted eagle is really the smallest of the lot as far as the aquila eagles is concerned. This is a bird that actually breeds in the southwestern corner of South Africa and stays there more or less throughout the year. But then there are also migratory birds from Europe that migrate into most of Africa in the southern summer time. So it's a small eagle and thus often overlooked, but certainly a very, very powerful bird still, and also a very interesting bird to watch and to study in more detail. Now, just a little bit about the behavior. What I'm showing here is a martial eagle, because the title of my presentation was Real Bird Meat. And you can see on the blood there on the bird that this has actually eaten some meat. This is the same individual that I showed there in my opening slide. The eagles, obviously, because they are powerful, they often take large prey. Simon Thompson already elaborated on the crowned eagle. A preferred prey of them are the monkeys, but they even take larger prey like female bushbuck. And what this bird is doing at the moment is it's mantling over the prey. That's what we refer to that. When they spread out the wings, so they basically want to protect their prey from any predator that may take it away. In this case, I suppose this bird didn't really like being photographed, so that's why she's handling over the prey. And here again is our martial eagle, the same individual that I've shown already. What you see there underneath him, the little bit of brown, is a steenbok, fully grown steenbok that this martial eagle has killed. And that is really sort of on the size limit of what they're able to kill. But martial eagles are also very adaptable and quite opportunistic. So whatever is available, whether it's a hare, whether it's guinea fowl, whether it's a leguan, they make use of a large variety of prey. But again, on this slide, I just want to draw your attention to the hind claw, that very large claw, just like the sparrow eagle, to be able to then kill their prey. Then we have our tawny eagle once again, that's sitting very proudly on what I think is a young impala. And this is really a large prey for a tawny eagle. And that basically indicates that in all probability this bird didn't kill this baby impala, but it actually makes use of a dead animal that is lying around there. And that's an important thing to consider, because very often livestock owners, farmers, they would see an eagle sitting on a dead lamb or a sheep even, or maybe a calf or whatever, and they would immediately assume that the eagle is actually the killer. And that is why many of the larger raptors, the eagles, are being prosecuted in Africa, and why they're killed on a large scale. But in the meantime, this animal has probably died because of some other reason, and the eagle is just making use of a free meal. And many eagles do that, even Barrow's eagle, the big powerful one, and smaller species as well, they all make use of a free meal as it is available. Then we've got Ayers eagle. I mentioned it already as a hunter of birds. If one looks at this bird here, it seems to have broad shoulders, so it's really a very, very powerful flyer. And so they overcome even pigeons and doves in flight. And this is really what they specialize on. So it's not only the larger mammals that the eagles would prefer as their prey, but certainly a variety of birds as well, bigger ones like guinea fowl, smaller ones than the doves, but doves certainly make up an important part of the diet of many of these species. Then we have the steppe eagle, which is a large and powerful bird. And in the northern hemisphere, where they breed, they actually behave like proper eagles. When they're in Africa, they change their diet a little bit, and often they prey on smaller items. I suppose they are a little bit more easy to get hold of in Africa. But the one item that they're quite fond of are insects, and mainly then also in the form of termite alates. So these flying termites that emerge once it has rained. And then one will often see large flocks of eagles together, they having a feast with all the termites that emerge from the soil. I once in northern Botswana, and I must admit I only saw it once, but I saw a group of at least 100 steppe eagle all sitting on the ground and all having a feast. And obviously, again, as our environments are changing, that is something that one doesn't see very often. So here again are the steppe eagles, and the reason why they're sitting on the carcasses is not really to eat that bit of meat that is left there, although they may do so, but they're really going for the insects that are attracted by this rotting meat. So to see a flock of steppe eagles, certainly not unusual. And the same really applies to the other one that comes from the northern hemisphere as a migratory bird into Africa, and that is the lesser spotted eagle. Also a very adaptable bird in Africa, very fond of flying termites. So again, one would often see them in flocks sitting on the ground like this one here, or they would feed on birds. They're quite fond of quilias. They go and attack a colony of quilias and take the nestlings out of the nest. So again, it's not really very eagle-like that they eat this small prey, but it just shows that eagles are really also quite adaptable birds. Then just a note or two about the breeding behavior. This is more or less what the nest of most eagles look like, not always on a cliff, but it could also be in a tree. And often a pair would have more than one nest that they use. So they would often have a preferred nest and they would use that quite often. Obviously, they don't breed more than once a year. And every year they renovate it a little bit, they add a little bit to the platform, and then also bring in green leaves, and eventually then the pair will settle down and they will lay normally 2 eggs, and usually both eggs and hatch, but eventually there's only one nestling on the nest, because the bigger one, they don't hatch on the same day, so the one is usually a day or 2 or 3 older than the younger one, so he has a weight advantage. He normally takes the food and he picks at his smaller sibling until that one is eventually dead, and there's only one of the chicks that eventually is being reared. So let's just quickly have a look at urban eagles as well. And here the crowned eagle, Simon Thompson did this presentation, also referred to the crowned eagles that breed throughout Africa in urban areas. They don't just live there, but they also breed there in their very typical huge platform nest with a chick that you see on the nest there. And one of the previous speakers was Dr. Shane McPherson. And if you've listened to his presentation, then I'm sure he gave you a lot more detail on this specific topic. So I know that a number of people that joined tonight didn't attend previous sessions, but you can find the PowerPoint presentation also on Sharescreen Africa on the website. So if you would like to look at that, because there's obviously interesting behavior to be seen. Here we see a young bird on the left-hand side, which is mainly white in color, that is attacking the adult bird. Probably not really attacking, because that is probably the parent, and it just wants something to eat from the parent, but the parent has decided enough is enough. You must go and fight for your own sake, and so he's trying to shove the bird away. Then in South Africa, we've got the Barrow's eagle. There are 2 pairs that are really very well known. The one is in the Johannesburg area at Roodepoort, or specifically at an area that is called the Roodekrans, which is inside the Walter Sisulu National Botanical Garden. And here the pair has been there for many, many years. Obviously, it's not always the same individual, because it's happened quite regularly that one of the pair will disappear and then another companion is found again, but they've been there for many years. So if you go into the botanical garden, right on the far side, there's this beautiful waterfall. And although one can't really see the nest from where the visitors are standing, but it's right up there close to the waterfall. But you don't really need to go up there to see it, because in any case you won't be able to get close to it. There is a group of people that actually monitor these eagles, and you can have a look at their website as well, www.blackeagles.co.za. And most important, they also have a webcam up there, so you can just go to the website of Africam, and there you can actually see what they're doing. Now, at the moment, their offspring, and obviously, again, they only produce one offspring in a season, is fairly large already, so they're not really sitting in the nest at them anymore. But in the breeding season, then it's always on the nest, and you can really see what they've been able to do. So this is one of the 2 pairs of Barrow's eagle that are famous in South Africa. The other one is in Pretoria, specifically on what is called the Wonderboom Nature Reserve. And again, there is a group of people that monitors them. Black eagles, WB, so WB stands for Wonderboom. www.blackeagleswb.com. And again, they've got webcams up. These eagles, unfortunately, they often make use of other nesting sites, so you're not always guaranteed to be able to see them. But to have this pair that actually they're not at the nest and they roam all over Pretoria. I see them regularly where I stay, and to have them here is quite exciting. And then there's another urban eagle that we have here in Pretoria, which is Ayers eagle. So in South Africa, if you're not familiar with Ayers eagle, because it's really a very elusive bird in our part of the world, but come to Pretoria, and that the region behind the union buildings, behind the government buildings, is actually quite well known for Ayers eagle that visits there in the summer months. And all the way to the University of Pretoria, the experimental farm, you can often see them there. Not only the adults that I show on the right here, but even the young birds, which really look very different from a color point of view. But they are just like the adults. They're also smallish, very powerful eagles. And so to see them is also really a great experience. Then my second group that I've been asked to deal with are the snake eagles. So snake eagles are not true eagles. We've defined the true eagles or the hawk eagles already. Snake eagles obviously are large and eagle-like, but as we can see here on the slide, they don't have fully feathered lower legs, and that differentiates them immediately from the true eagles. All their Cerciatus snake eagles, they actually feed on snakes, those that belong to the genus Cerciatus. As we can see here, this is a black-chested snake eagle, and then they also do have some other characteristics that distinguish them from the true eagles and the hawk eagles. So there we see the other characteristics as well. This is a brown snake eagle, the bare lower legs. And then what is also very conspicuous here is that they've got very large heads and very large eyes. And in those Cerciatus snake eagles, the eyes are always a bright yellow color. So that really makes them very interesting. And I always refer to as snake eagles, not as eagles. In my book, they don't qualify as eagles, but they're snake eagles, but they're really also very interesting birds from their own point of view. So the majority, they actually do eat snakes, although the larger species of snake may be torn apart. So if they, for instance, would eat a puff adder, they would really tear it apart. But if it's not that large, and especially the thinner, more slender snakes, they are just swallowed in one go, as you can see here. That's a black-chested snake eagle on the right, and a short-toed snake eagle from Europe, North Africa on the left. And again, one can see those large eyes there and yellow color of the eyes that really make them very characteristic birds. So again, a short-toed snake eagle here, trying to grab hold of a prey. Again, the large head and the large yellow eyes are very conspicuous there. Now, in this case, this is not a venomous snake, but they do take venomous snakes like puff adders and even mambas and cobras. And the question is, what happens if they get bitten? Now, usually they don't get bitten because they use their wings to actually attract the attention of the snake. So the snake would strike onto the wing feathers, and obviously there's no blood supply in the wing feathers, so that would not harm them. The feathering on the body is quite dense, so the snake would also find it difficult to penetrate the feathers and really put their fangs into the flesh. And if one has a look at the scales at the lower part of the feet, they are really very, very thick. And again, if the snake's bites into the feet, that would not really have an effect on these birds. They also seem to be immune to a certain degree against the snake venom. Not completely, but they usually, if they do get bitten, they actually recover after a while again. Now, sometimes the snake also gets the upper hand. So the snake eagle has to be careful what he's doing. I think this one eventually actually did escape. but you can imagine that the snake was certainly much more happy than the snake eagle at this specific stage. The breeding, again, those large nests of many of the larger raptors built in the top of a tree so that it's accessible from the top. And we only see the one egg there. And here is a nice sequence where the female is sitting on the nest. You can still see the egg there, so it's certainly not a youngster here. And the male has just come in and caught a snake for the female, so that's part of the courtship feeding. When they've got youngsters, then they normally bring them also, and you can see it there. Just the tip of the tail is sticking out of the beak of whoever brings the food, and then the other one, so that would either be the female, like in this case, or the youngster just pulls that snake from the crop of the other bird, and then they would swallow it themselves. So they again, they take the snake and pulls it out and eats it itself. Then to have a look at some of the snake eagles that occur in Africa. These here are two of the smaller and more specialized snake eagles that usually hunt from a perch. On the left-hand side is a southern banded snake eagle, which occurs along, we call it sort of a coastal strip from South to East Africa. And then the western banded snake eagle, which has a fairly wider distribution and more in the western part of Africa. Now, they look quite similar, but if one looks at detail, then they're certainly different. But they are certainly not very common birds, very specialized as far as their habitat and their food requirements is concerned. So one does not encounter them very often. Then we have our black-chested snake eagle again. The name that it used to have in the past is the black-breasted snake eagle. I'm still not quite sure what's the difference between the breast and the chest, although it seems that every baby knows that already. But here's the adult bird, and there is then a young bird. And as you can see, the young birds really look very different to the adult bird. And you can actually confuse them very easily with this bird here, which is the brown snake eagle. Now, both the black-chested and also brown snake eagle occur very widely in Africa. The black-chested preferring a little bit more arid type of habitat than the brown, although they do overlap in their distribution. The black-chested is also quite a nomadic bird, so they move around quite a lot in Africa, but certainly both of them are quite common in many parts of Africa. Then we have this chappie here, which looks a little bit like a black-chested snake eagle, although the colors are not as bold, and that is Rhodian snake eagle, which is a relatively uncommon bird in the Sahel zone in North Africa, just south of the Sahara, occurring in the southern part of the distribution in most of the season, and then when it rains, then they move a little bit north into the adjoining area to the Sahara Desert. But the behavior is also very similar to that of the black-chested snake eagle. And then we have this one, which also at the first glance does resemble a slightly duller colored black-chested snake eagle, and that is the short-toed snake eagle. As I mentioned previously, that also used to be called the short-toed eagle. And the reason why they've got short toes is specifically to actually grasp snakes, and now the name is a little bit more characteristic of its habit. So it's called a short-toed snake eagle. They occur mostly in Europe, into Asia, but they are quite widely distributed in North Africa, where they only really occur as migratory birds. When it's too cold in the north, and they move a little bit more south. Then our next one is quite a special kind of bird, which is Congo serpent eagle. So it's not really exactly like the snake eagles, but it certainly also does eat primarily snakes. And both the name and also the habitat on the background of the picture here tells you that it occurs in Central Africa and it's more of a rainforest specialist. And quite obviously, being secretive, it is not easily founded, so there's not a lot of information about this particular bird. And then the last one is one that you recognize immediately. And if you don't recognize it here, then it's because I'm showing you the young bird. But at least the name, I'm sure everybody knows that, the Batteria. And this is not a eagle, it's also a honorary snake eagle. So it's got the large head and the large eyes, although the eyes are not yellow as they would be in the other snake eagles, but they're darkish in color. But also the lower legs are not feathered, so it indicates that this is certainly not a true eagle. So here are the adult birds, the female with the pale band on the flight feathers on the left, and the male with the darker flight feathers on the right. And so in flight, you can also quite easily distinguish between them. The female has got more white on the upper wing, and so the lower wing is also mostly white, and the male with only a smaller area on the leading edge of the wing and the trailing edge of the wing, quite a broad dark black area. Now, the name Batelier was actually given to this bird by Francois Leverrier. Now, he was a very early scientist that visited South Africa in the late 1700s, and he explored many areas. Now, at that stage, the system of the binomial scientific names as we use them nowadays by what's his name again? That was not quite in fashion yet, and so Francois Legrand gave most of the birds actually a French name, and in this case here, he even named it the Batelier. He even did some paintings of this bird, although it's a bit difficult to really recognize the Batelier there because the colors are a little bit different. But he named it after a sort of an occupation that was at that stage quite common in the larger cities of France, and that was called a batelier. Now, the batelier for a long time was still illustrated on the tarot cards. Nowadays, it's not called a batelier anymore. It's called a magician. But what the batelier did in surveillance time is that they actually entertained people with all the magic tricks. But then they were also great acrobats. So they tumbled, they did tightrope walking and all kinds of things. They didn't just specialize on tightrope walking, in spite of what many of the books will actually tell you. They were really very versatile in their craft to entertain the public in the courts of Paris and some of the other larger cities. And so our battery is certainly one of the most beautiful of our larger eagles, and specifically the snake eagles. And so it is quite appropriate that I end with a very attractive and really very beautiful bird like that. But before I end, let me just again acknowledge all the photographers and thank you once again for spending the time out there and making these birds visually so interesting and so impressive that we can all enjoy them. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ulrich, for that fascinating talk. Eagles are definitely a super charismatic group of raptors in Africa. I think everybody can relate to them in one way or another. So thank you very much for all that information. I'd like to remind everybody, please, if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them into the chat. We'll address them at the end of the talk. Or if you'd rather, you're welcome to ask your question live. But we'll get to that question, those questions at the end of the episode as a whole. So I think with that, let's head over to East Africa to join Simon Thompson for a virtual field trip to see what eagles he has in company.
There are 6 species of snake eagles belonging to the genus Circaetus. All of them occur in Africa. The short-toed snake eagle is more familiar in Spain and Mediterranean, but it also nests in North Africa, and it spreads as far as sub-Saharan Africa, entering as further south as Kenya. Its very close relation, the Bedouin snake eagle, is a breeding resident snake eagle all the way from West Africa, and again just as far as Kenya, really restricted to the north of the equator. Then there's the black-breasted snake eagle, familiar to most of us in East and Southern Africa. All these 3 eagles are extremely difficult to tell apart when they're juveniles. Often you need to have them in the hand in order to identify them. All of them are not necessarily restricted to eating snakes. They'll take a lot of reptiles, even small mammals such as rodents and small hares, and small birds as well. So they are quite eclectic feeders. The much larger brown snake eagle has a different size foot as well, with a relatively long middle toe, and that also isn't just restricted to eating snakes. The brown snake eagle is found all the way from West Africa to East Africa, down through Eastern Africa, and then joins up again in Southern Africa, avoiding really the harsh deserts as well as the closed canopy forests. It would appear, by its presence and absence in most of its range, to be an intra-African migrant, and actually all of the Circaetus group really are highly mobile and quite able to move and be nomadic. As an overall comment about the status of snake eagles throughout Africa, they're doing not as bad as most. Unfortunately, the battler eagle would today it's almost virtually confined to the protected areas. The other snake eagles, the woodland snake eagles, are obviously finding it difficult as the forests get felled. The odd Congo serpent eagle is also probably subjected to fragmentation of its habitat. However, they are highly nomadic and extremely mobile and able to move across Africa and take opportunity wherever it may arise, with sudden flooding in one area being beneficial to it or not. The group is not really eagles. It's a misnomer, and that is true for many of the large raptors. The English language does not do them justice. They are, by and large birds, larger than buzzards, but they have naked legs, and they are not related in any way to true eagles. They are magnificent. Some of them, such as the black-breasted snake eagle, look like miniature martial eagles, and in some ways perhaps even mimic them. They certainly cause panic amongst guinea fowl, who seem to be incapable of telling the difference between a martial eagle and the perfectly harmless black-breasted snake eagle. They are, in general, one of the most secure groups of eagles in Africa. There is a group of brown eagles that were formerly comfortably placed in the genus Aquila. Today, that genus is a little insecure, with other genuses having been stripped of their title and being tucked into the large group, of which Aquila is a rather broad representative of rather powerful medium to large eagles that are normally just brown without any distinguished looking, very different looking juvenile phase. The chief representative of the genus would be the golden eagle, a massive, large brown eagle that does occur in Africa, in North Africa. These are chiefly brown eagles, both in their juvenile and adult plumage, with powerful feet, quite capable of killing large animals. The golden eagle is rather exceptional in its massive foot. Its close relation, the Spanish and Eastern imperial eagles, are not so powerfully footed. In fact, they have quite a small foot. The Spanish imperial eagle evidently is restricted to Spain, but it is a very rare vagrant in northwest Africa. The Eastern imperial eagle is quite a common migrant into Eastern Africa. It is not unusual to see maybe 1 or 2 every year, certainly here in Kenya. It is a very glamorous looking eagle, built in very much the same way as the golden eagle, but again with a much smaller foot mass. As we descend down the scale in size, we get to the steppe eagle, some individuals of which, very large females, are almost the same weight as a male imperial eagle. So when it comes to identification, never be comfortable with just looking at their size. The steppe eagle migrates from the Russian steppes all the way down into Africa and as far as southern Africa. It used to be incredibly numerous, with as many as thousands of individuals flying over a mountain in northeastern Kenya in a single day. Unfortunately, the species has now been uplisted to endangered. Its smaller, but probably not closely related cousin, the tawny eagle, is a much more rapacious eagle and apparently is much more closely related to the imperial eagle than it is to the steppe eagle. In many ways, it should be called the African imperial eagle. It's larger footed than its Siberian cousin. It is much more rapacious, quite capable of taking quite medium-sized animals such as hares and even young antelope. Unfortunately, is rather given to eating carrion, as are all the other eagles, and thus very susceptible to being poisoned. The other typical brown eagles, but now in a different genus called clanger, would be the greater spotted eagle and the lesser spotted eagle, two species that are extremely difficult to tell apart. So difficult to tell apart are they that they actually hybrid with one another. The lesser spotted eagle is so small and so delicate it rather looks like a kite. The long-crested eagle, which has now been moved out of its own genus into the clanger genus, is an insight into being able to identify the spotted eagles. So now we move on to another group of eagles. The smaller hawk-eagle type raptors of Africa would include a rather eclectic group, again chopped up into different genera thanks to new DNA work. We'll start with the long-crested eagle, which is certainly a very glamorous, typical looking hawk eagle with a very, very expansive crest, and yet it is very closely related to the lesser spotted eagles and the greater spotted eagle of the genus clanger. So sadly it's now being moved out of its own genus into that genus of spotted eagles. In some ways it's extremely useful for telling and identifying spotted eagles because it flies in very much the same way. Also has extremely long tarsus, a long mouth, gape, and oddly they all share a very straight talon. Not that that's very easy to see, but one can tell that the DNA folks have got it right. It definitely is a clanger. The other smaller hawk-eagle types would include the Wahlberg's eagle, the booted eagle, and the Ayers hawk eagle. In many ways, they differ from one another. Despite that, they are still included in the genus Hariatus. The Wahlberg's has a fairly short middle toe, although it is still a magnificent flower, capable of fantastic stoops, taking birds as well as small mammals, rodents. It is an inter-African migrant of note, moving all the way from southern Africa or its breeding grounds in East Africa to South Sudan or the southern part of Sudan, where it probably specializes in eating flay rats or large rodents typical of flooded areas. The booted eagle is a migrant from Spain and the Mediterranean, although there is a small population in southern Africa and in Namibia. It is a very glamorous bird, stoops with a heart-shaped stoop, very familiar with taking small birds and doves in particular, and its close relation, the Ayers hawk eagle, does have extremely long middle toe in comparison to the booted eagle, and is much more classy, much more rapacious. The other two hawk eagles, getting larger as we go, is the African hawk eagle and then the Bonelli's eagle. To many, the Bonelli's is really just a Mediterranean, European, Asian species all the way to India, but it actually occurs in quite good numbers in the Mediterranean climates of Sudan on the Red Sea. It's a rather more predacious and powerful version of the Bonelli's, both of which are really specialists in taking birds and game birds in particular. Leslie Brown called the African hawk eagle the most powerful eagle for its size in Africa. Its prey range overlaps with that of the martial eagle. It's an extremely powerful hawk eagle.
Fantastic. Thank you once again to Simon Thompson for that tour. So we're gonna have some time to ask questions and have a bit of a discussion. If this is the first time that you're joining us, if you'd like to ask a question, there's two ways you can do it. Either you can type it in the chat box, or if you'd like to ask it live, go ahead and raise your hand. At the bottom of your window is a reaction button. When you click that reaction button, there's a raise hand function. just click on raise hand, and we will turn to you for your question. So I think let's kick it off with some of the chat box questions. The first one is from Mike Bridgeford to Ulrich. Is a long-crested eagle regarded as a true eagle?
Yes, Mike, it is certainly a true eagle. Although the feathering around the lower part of the leg are quite dense around the leg, so the legs don't look as thick as many of the other true eagles, but they certainly regarded as true eagles. And as Simon also just indicated, it seems, and I must admit I wasn't aware of that, that their genus now has now changed from the Phaeatus to Klanga. And Klanga are certainly of the true eagles, so they're definitely true eagles. Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of bird name changes all the time. Try and stay on top of it gets a bit of a nightmare, doesn't it? Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for that, Ulrich. The next question is from Eric. Eric would like to know what could be the potential threat of these eagles. I would imagine he means to these eagles.
Yeah, look, obviously most of the raptors are threatened in one way or another, and eagles are certainly in that category where they're quite easily affected by environmental conditions. So from a population dynamics point of view, we normally can really divide all animals into the so-called K strategists and the R strategists. Now, the K strategists are the more specialized ones. They're normally also slower breeding animals, and they're often, not necessarily, but they're often larger individuals as well. The R strategists are the more smaller species in many cases, but they're also the less specialized, and they also breed much more rapid. So what happens with the R strategists, if there's something going wrong with a number of the individuals, then they breed up quite easily again, and they replace those that had died. Whereas the K strategists, they are slow breeders. So something goes wrong, there isn't the surplus of young animals that will take the place of those that have died or were injured or whatever the case has been. And as I said, normally the K strategists are normally quite specialized birds. So they're specialized in the habitat requirement, which is obviously linked to the food source, and in the case of birds, it's a breeding site, etc., etc. And the fact is that most of the eagles, because they're larger, they automatically fall sort of into the K strategists. And it's exactly the K strategists that are quite easily threatened by whatever goes wrong in the environment. So if one has a look at whatever red data book or red data list you want to look at, whether it's an international one or a more regional one, it's full of raptors, and especially the larger raptors, they certainly are in there. And to get them out of the red list is easier said than done, because they often need large areas as well. So they may breed in a nature area, in a protected area, but then when they're hunting, they actually leave into the adjacent areas, and that's where they get affected by environmental conditions. They get killed. So it's really difficult to protect the larger eagles.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that, Ulrich. I see Eric has another question. Do eagles regurgitate food for their chicks in case of a hunt far from the nests?
No, they don't really regurgitate it. Look, most of the eagles, and if I remember correctly, that was mentioned in one of the previous presentations, just like owls, they also regurgitate some of the food items that they don't digest. So we are all quite well aware of owl pellets, which is the feathers or the fur or some of the bones that the owls would regurgitate. And as they normally do that on their nest and the place where they roost at night, or during the day rather, you often find these owl pellets in quite a number of them together. But the diurnal raptors, which then means the eagles, they also do regurgitate, but that again is just to get rid of the food that they can't digest. They wouldn't do that for the chicks. So they normally, if they've caught something, they will bring that prey item to the nest. And then if the chick is fairly large already, they will just leave that prey item with the chick to dismember and pull it to smaller pieces. If the chick is still very young, then they would actually rip off small pieces of flesh from the prey and feed it to the youngsters. But it's always bought as a whole prey item and not being regurgitated.
Perfect. The next question we have is from Emmanuel. I think it would be important to highlight some of the common threats to the birds of prey in different parts of the world. Wow, Emmanuel, I think that's a massive one. The different, obviously threats would vary from area to area. So I think, from Lemaine, I'd like to hear from Lemaine actually in Kenya. Are there or at least in the Mara where you're working, are there certain threats that kind of compete other threats, or what are some of the main threats that you see in the Mara?
I think the major threats here in the Mara is the issue of poisoning, because that's what we've been having a lot of fatalities. But they are wide of range depending on different regions. But here in the Mara, as other people are talking about pesticides and other things, here in the Mara we are talking about poisoning, like put baits on dead carcasses. So that's what's happening here in the Mara.
Right, poisoning.
Yeah.
And from your side, Ulrich, would you put one threat above the others?
Well, it's really difficult to list them in an order because it depends on the area. As we've just heard, in the Mara, it's mostly it's poison, and that certainly also applies in other parts of Africa. Poison for various reasons. On the one hand, to get rid of these predators or the eagles, which people conceive to be a threat to their livestock, and also to kill animals which are used as for what we often refer to as medicinal purposes, although usually they don't have any medicinal qualities whatsoever. And then again, one must always remember the habitat change. We often call it habitat change, but strictly speaking, it's habitat destruction, because even if the habitat is just slightly changed, and to us as people, it still looks sort of okay. But if one is a specialized raptor, if the habitat is slightly changed, then it's actually destroyed. So, and that is a very, very important reason, because again, the bigger eagles, they normally use a larger area where they hunt, a territory or home range. So they need a big area, and if most of that is being changed, then their prey species, they dwindle. The nesting trees or other sites where they breed, they change. So it's really quite an important point. So those Barrow's eagle that I referred to that breed here in Johannesburg area and also Pretoria, they are really quite exceptional that this large eagle like that would actually live here. And yes, I know, especially in Roodepoort at the Walter Sisulu Botanical Garden, they have been fed by people. They actually release some rabbits, not rabbits, hyraxes there from time to time. But it's quite phenomenal that these animals are able to survive there. And then there's obviously some other threats as well. Sometimes people actually like to have a raptor at home. Why specifically they want to do that, I don't know. But yes, unfortunately, people do go and collect young raptors especially, and then if they don't know what they're doing, in addition to the fact that it's actually illegal, I think in most countries, the bird doesn't grow up as it should be, so they often don't really know what to feed that bird, so it has got all kinds of health complications. The lack of calcium in the diet is usually a huge factor. So yeah, if I want to be an animal, I don't really want to be an eagle. It has the image, but it has a lot of problems that it's really facing in the environment.
Yeah, definitely. Emmanuel has another question here, actually. Where will you classify the birds of prey, especially the eagles, on the food chain or the pyramid? Would you classify them as a keystone species or?
Yes, they're certainly keystone species. On the ecological pyramid, they are the top predators in many cases. And if they're not really the top predators, they certainly are keystone species. So they're often very good indicators of environmental health. If their numbers dwindle, then we know that there's actually something wrong in the rest of the ecosystem, because these factors that influence the eagles do influence the rest of the ecosystem as well. So certainly, yes, they're very good indicators of environmental health and at the top of the ecological pyramid, most definitely.
Perfect. The next question is from Alex, and I believe this is for Lemaine. We have several incidents around Mount Kenya where the poisoning of raptors is happening. The other day, I found a long-crested eagle poisoned, and some time back, a crowned eagle that was injured. But luckily, Simon was there to help, as he always is. What can we do about this? Lemaine.
Thank you. So I think the best thing you can do is when you find an injured bird or a bird that needs help, kindly contact anyone from the Kenya Birds of Prey Trust. Our contacts are there in our website, and we will respond it as much as we can. So that's all I can say. Just pass the message and all will be well.
Perfect.
Yeah, and thank you for the crown eagle. We have it with us.
Fed. So, and I assume it's doing well.
Very well.
Good. That's always good to hear. That's always good to hear.
Yeah.
Cool. I've got a question here from Greg Esterhazen, and this is for Ulrich, specifically. Thank you for the session. Working in Pilanesberg, we would love to hear your take on why there is a lack of vultures and other large raptors in the reserve. In 11 years of working in the park, we have only seen a handful of vultures.
Yeah, that is really very sad about Pilanesberg, because although it's a lovely park and it's actually quite large at over 60,000 hectares, it's actually still too small to really provide a safe haven for those larger species. So I personally have been going to Pilanesberg for many years. And at the beginning, one always would see vultures just outside the park. There's a power line, you know, those high voltage cables. And you would basically always see some vultures there. But I can't really remember when last did I see any vultures there. So they often, I think those vultures were mainly Cape vultures that came from the colonies in the Magaliesberg, but as those colonies have also gone downwards, so obviously those species have also declined. And then the closest vultures that would really be from Pilanesberg are in Botswana, and that's really quite a distance that they have to fly. It's certainly within easy flying distance for a Cape vulture or white-backed vulture, which are the vultures that one would normally expect there, but it's still quite a distance. So many moons ago, there was also a nice little nature reserve protected area outside the town of Lichtenburg, which is quite a bit closer to the Botswana border. And there was a very successful vulture restaurant, and they even had some white-backed vulture and even the leopard-faced vulture breeding there together with secretary birds. But again, that's also been closed in the meantime, so the whole vulture area is also not there anymore. And then as far as the larger raptors is concerned, again, although Pilanesberg is large, it's too small to really accommodate a number of pairs of the larger species. So the problem is that they would breed inside the park, but they would fly outside the park to feed. And as we know that around Pilanesberg, it's a very sort of urbanized and certainly very high density of human population, and large raptors and humans really don't go hand in hand. Together with that, often what is voiced in Pilanesberg is that the overpopulation, I certainly see it as an overpopulation of elephants, Many of the large trees have been removed by the elephants, and so the larger raptors often breed in the larger trees, and then they obviously have lost their breeding trees in the meantime as well. And unfortunately, one sees that in many of the smaller nature reserves around Gauteng as well. I visit quite a number of them on a regular basis, and I often keep records of what I've seen and the numbers that I've seen, and the whole raptor population, even the smaller ones, you know, the goshawk and sparrows and so on, they've really all declined over the years. So the fact that you've seen 11, or a couple of vultures in 11 years, that's certainly not an exception. Some years ago, and I can't remember the date anymore, but there was a vulture or a scavenger hide built in Pilanesberg, and the idea was that during the day the visitors could actually look at the vultures coming down to feed there, and at night you could even sleep over there and look at the hyenas coming to feed. But because of the lack of vultures, maybe that hide was also closed quite a number of years ago, which is really quite sad, but that is what our modern environment is all about, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, that's quite sad, and I think raptor populations in general, as you said, are on the decline across Africa, which is something that researchers all over the continent have kind of found. I think we're going to take the last question. I see Jed Vaughan has got their hand raised. Jed, go ahead and ask your unmute yourself, and you can ask your question.
Hello guys, how is everyone?
Very, very well yourself, Jed.
Wonderful. I've got a question for Ulrich. I wanted to ask, I saw a study recently that we've lost 95% of our top tree canopy cover in the Kruger National Park due to the overpopulation of elephants. How crucial do you think the top tree canopy is in these big parks for nesting habitats for most of our raptors?
That I must say is quite a loaded question, because as soon as it gets to elephants, different people have different opinions, and it depends on your point of departure what your opinion really is. So have you lost it, or has it gone back to what it was in the past? Well, there are different opinions, and I don't want to voice my own opinion here. But certainly the fact that trees, the bigger trees, have been lost by elephants, that must have an effect on the larger species of birds, not only the vultures and the bigger eagles, but even things like the ground hornbill and so on. So it must have an effect. Whether that is sort of going back to what it was a couple of centuries ago, that I don't know. There's certainly there's pros and cons as far as the elephant is concerned. But yeah, in recent years, since the elephant population has grown so much over the last couple of decades, certainly the bigger trees in many areas, they have disappeared.
Thanks, Ulrich. Yeah, that as soon as you mentioned elephant population, that's always a dangerous topic to start talking about there. But yeah, thanks for that. All right, we're going to take one last question for the night from Errol. Please go ahead, unmute yourself, and ask your question.
Thank you very much. It's actually Leslie on Errol's phone.
Oh, Leslie.
And it's for Ulrich. Thank you, Ulrich, and thank you for advertising this. All the photographs you showed of the of the tawny eagle had I always thought the difference between them, if you could see their heads, steppe and tawny, was that the steppe eagle, its gape went further back. But your photographs that you showed of tawny eagles, they also had a gape that went very far back. Is that because they're different subspecies? Thanks.
Okay, I must admit that I must have a better look at my photographs, but I'm sure what I indicated as tawny eagles were tawny eagles. It obviously also depends on at what angle the photograph was taken. it has to be a full sight-on view of the bird to see that the gape where it ends underneath the eye, the middle of the eye or the back of the eye. Together with that, there's normally also a little bit of a color difference in the gape. With a steppe eagle, it's slightly more orangey, whereas with a tawny eagle, it's more yellowy, and also much thinner with a tawny eagle than with a steppe eagle. But I'm just going to have a look at all my slides. I'm 100% confident that I did identify them correctly, but let me just look at that gape there as well, and then I'll give you some feedback in private.
Fantastic. Thank you all. So thank you to our speakers for joining us tonight, and thank you to all our audience members for coming out and joining. Just a reminder, next week, same time, same place, 7:30 South African time. On Wednesday night, we will be having another episode of Share Screen Africa's Raptor Education Series. And next week is an extremely exciting talk. We're going to be talking about the falcons and kestrels of Africa, and joined by Dr. Vikash Tataya from the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation. So he's going to be speaking to us about not just kestrels and falcons in general, but I believe he'll also be talking about his particular area of expertise, which is the Mauritian kestrel, which is a very, very good conservation success story that we haven't that is kind of underrated actually. So join in on that talk next week. It's definitely going to be a very exciting one. Until then, thank you all for joining, and have a fantastic night.